Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
Oke, ini udah live juga di ini. Sip.
Are we ready to start?
We are admitting the participants, Professor.
Yeah, I seem to have lost the image. Are we all right?
Yes, yes, we are all right. We're highlighting the poster, the event poster.
Yeah, but I can see you in a small image, but I can't see anything else. It's just, whereas before I had a split screen with you and myself sharing the screen.
Yes, Professor, I will start by saying hello to our participants, and then we'll introduce you, and then there will be a book trailer, and then there will be, in the screen, there will be you and me. We're going to have a conversation. So,
All right.
so
Okay.
at the beginning, yeah, so I will do a quick opening, and then we're going to have book trailer, and then the host will spotlight you as well.
All right. Okay.
Thank you, Professor.
Oke, 3, 2, 1, go, Mbak Sadia.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello, Mizaners, everywhere you are. I hope you're having a wonderful afternoon because today is a special day for all of us. We are going to officially launch the Bahasa Indonesia translations, the much anticipated book, critically acclaimed, award-winning modern classic novel Paradise by Professor Abdurrazak Gurna. I'm sure that you are familiar with this book. Paradise was originally published in 1994 and had received many awards, and we are very honored, very privileged today to have Professor Gurna with us. We're going to have a conversations with Professor Gurna in a couple of minutes. Please bear with us. And we are also live stream on YouTube. And I would like to, of course, thank all the participants, those who are joining us on Zoom and via YouTube channel, the book communities that have been relentlessly supporting us at Mizan Publishing, avid readers, longtime readers of Paradise as well, who have been waiting for the Bahasa Indonesia translations of the book, all the Mizaners, all of our community. Welcome. Welcome to the book launch of the Bahasa Indonesia translations of Paradise by Professor Abdurrazak Gurna. My friends, Mizaners, ladies and gentlemen, all of you who are joining us this afternoon, Professor Gurna needs no further introductions, but allow me to share with you a quick introductions about Professor Abdurrazak Gurna. He is a Tanzanian-born British novelist and an academic. His novels include Paradise, published in 1994, which was shortlisted for both the Booker Prize and the Whitbread Prize. His next novel, By the Sea, also longlisted for the Booker Prize and shortlisted for the Los Angeles Times Book Prize, and Desertion, published in 2005, shortlisted for the Commonwealth's Writers Prize. And I'm sure that all of you know, and we are also celebrating Professor Gurna as one of the laureates of Nobel Prize, specifically 2021 Nobel Prize in Literature for his uncompromising and compassionate penetrations of the effects of colonialism and the fates of the refugee in the gulf between cultures and continent. Professor Gurna is also a professor of English and post-colonial literature at the University of Kent, and we are truly privileged to have him to have a conversations with us, with all of us this afternoon. The format of this afternoon book launch is we are going to have a book trailer to welcome you into the world of paradise, and we are going to have a conversations with Professor Gurna. We're going to have a Q&A where you will have an opportunity to ask Professor Gurna any questions that you think is relevant and important. And we are privileged also to have Professor Gurna reading the excerpts of the book. And we are going to end with an exciting details about how you can order the book. Mizaners, ladies and gentlemen, all of you attending this afternoon, without further ado, let's welcome Paradise. I wish we can have a big round of applause to welcome Paradise for our Indonesian readers. Yes. So, Mizaners, everybody, ladies and gentlemen, joining on Zoom and also on YouTube live stream, join me in welcoming Professor Abdurazak Gurna. Hello, good morning, Professor. Is it still morning? We are 5 hours ahead of you, yes?
It's very much morning. It's just after 10 o'clock in the morning here.
This after Oh, wonderful, wonderful. How are you, Professor?
I'm fine, thank you. I can only see you in a small image.
In a small image?
Yeah, right in the corner of my screen. So I wonder if you could do that split screen like you did before.
We will try. Our technical team will try. On my screen, it's also split screen between my screen and yours, Professor.
Yeah, well, it isn't here. Here I can only see a little stamp size collection
I see.
in a corner.
Okay, we will try. We will try our best. Our technical team is working on that so that it will work similarly in your screen as well. Professor,
Right.
we are, if I may begin, we are truly, truly honored to welcome Paradise and to bring Paradise into our, bookshelves, our Indonesian readers. We're very excited. This is a much anticipated translation. And the book was published, originally published in 1994, if I'm not mistaken. But, it's our privilege for us, even though it's already more than 30 years since the publications, for us to have Paradise in Bahasa Indonesia translation. It will be an honor if you can share with us some of the key themes of Paradise. We know that Paradise delves into the issues of identity and also displacement, some cultural clashes. But it would be an honor for us if you can share some of the key themes of Paradise to our Indonesian reader. And also, I did not mention so much about your background. I don't think that I'll be the right person to do so. Would like to also hear from you. How does your experience or what calls you into those themes, Professor?
Try. It sort of first came about as an idea because I had gone back to Zanzibar after many years absence because I couldn't go back. And I saw my father, who was then quite aged, quite old. In fact, he died the following year. And he was walking from our house to the mosque, which is just across a square. And it occurred to me just how old he was. He was in his 80s. And then I thought he would have been a child when our part of the world was colonized. Unlike you, in your part of the world, we were late arrivals in the sites, I suppose, of the European colonizers. So that was the idea that interested me. How would it have seemed to a child to see their world being taken in hand by strangers? How would it have seemed to him or to people like him, people of his generation? So that was the first thought. But then, novels are complex artifacts. They aren't about one thing. But there is almost always a kind of a starting impulse, a thing that makes you begin to, and as you reflect, or as I do anyway, as one reflects, then other issues come into it. So how is it that it became successful, this colonial project?
Mm-hmm.
What was it about what existed there? What divisions made it easier for these powerful forces to take over? Was it really just about advanced technology, or was it something that was also weak about the culture that was being attacked or invaded in this way? So I thought about that and thought about how we treated each other, how we treated women, how we treated children, and what all of these are also ways in which we, or people, societies, weaken themselves. So those are the kind of issues, really. It's about colonialism, sure, it's about the arrival, but it's also about what was going on. But it's not really about Europeans at all. It's really about what was going on in people's lives when this encounter took place.
And how do you come up with Yusuf, Professor? How does that character emerge? And in many stories about colonizations, both actual account of histories and also a fictional account of history, we often see a heroic character, but your character more represent the community of the more oppressed community. How do you how do you build that character?
Well, I mentioned that my first thought was of a young person, a child, and what we associate with, I suppose, young people, though they're not always correctly, is that they have a certain innocence. They don't fully grasp what is going on, and generally speaking, that innocence translates into a kind of acceptance and a benign acceptance of what circumstances, what happens to them. So I wanted that. So there is a kind of, to a certain extent, a kind of passivity in this figure, in the figure of the child, because the child is not always in a position to either fully understand or indeed to have agency to change things. So that was the first reason for choosing a child. But I also wanted a child to be both vulnerable, but also at the same time attractive, because this means that the child then becomes a focus of other people's interest and attention because of his attractiveness, but also increases his vulnerability. And at some stage, it occurred to me that the figure of Yusuf, that is to say, the prophet Yusuf, his story, and the story of his innocence and how he at first doesn't understand what was being done and what was happening. So that might be a kind of intertext, as you were, a way of also enriching the experience that that I was interested in. That's how I came to that figure. And of course, most people know that story. So in a way, it adds to an understanding. This is what we do when we read, I think. We don't just read a book on its own. We read it and we think, aha, this, I remember this is like this is like that. And you bring your other experiences of reading into that text that you're now engaged with.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor. And it's, for us, we are truly waiting. And as, Muslim majority community, the story of Prophet Yusuf really, resonates with us as well in our country. How would you see your book being perceived or being, accepted by the Indonesian community, Professor?
I hope they love it. So that's what, when you write, you hope that wherever it goes, I, speaking for myself, I don't write for a particular reader or particular readership. I hope everyone will read it, kind of a optimistic, hopeful way, that everybody will read it, and that, and this is the thing about literature, you see, about what we read, that we don't always have to be familiar with the specific landscape of that text. You and I could read a novel which is set in 19th century Russia. I've never been to Russia. I don't know if you have. And of course, neither of us are living in the 19th century anymore. But it's quite possible that we will see things there that will seem familiar because of our experiences, because of our own particular societies and so on. So that's what I think literature does. It both informs, gives us news, tells us about things we didn't know, but also we see things there that we do know. And in this respect, we both learn, but also kind of affirm our own perceptions and our own understanding, which is outside of that text. So if a piece of writing works, it should, in theory, work anywhere, because that process will take place wherever you are. But if the context, let's say like in Paradise, if the context also relies to some extent on a knowledge or experience of Islam and its stories, then that obviously will enrich that experience of reading, without necessarily it being the version that you know exactly, because there are always small differences as the stories get told and retold from one place to another. They indeed from one generation to another. They're all slightly revised, slightly changed ever so slightly. And there may be a way of telling that Yusuf story in Indonesia, which would not be exactly the same way as we would tell it in Zanzibar, but there will be enough recognition to say, aha, yes, we know this.
That's why this is a much anticipated book. And on top of that, Professor, talking about also, it's 30 years, almost 30 years anniversary. If I'm not very good at math, if I counted correctly, almost 30 years of anniversary of your book. How has it traveled, and has the reception been different from one decade to the next?
No, I think it's traveled pretty well. I mean, it received a reasonable kind of a good welcome when it was first published. Not only those prize shortlistings and so on, but also in the sense that people who read it with engagement, with pleasure, I think, and that has continued steadily. Of course, what made the big difference then was the award of the Nobel Prize in 2021, because the wonderful thing about that prize is that it's a global event, and then everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people anyway, a lot of publishers, a lot of readers want to know something about this writer, if they didn't know before. And the other really important and interesting thing as a result of that prize is that people want to read that writer's work in their own languages. So whereas before the book was available in anywhere, if you could read in English, and there were already some translations, but not many, about maybe 8 or 10 or something like that. I can't remember exactly. So in a way, it was already kind of available. But then the Nobel Prize made a lot more people interested in reading this person's work. And quite a lot of them chose to translate this text. So, I mean, it's made a big difference, of course, in the number of different kinds of translations that are now taking place.
How do you expect the book being discussed in the context of, or allow me to share the context of my questions a little bit. Colonialism in many of its form are remain presence in many of its form until today, and this book is also discussing, like you mentioned in your first explanations, an encounter of a young boy seeing his country, his culture being occupied, taken away from him, and how would you like to see it contextualized in many different countries, including in post-colonial contexts like Indonesia? Because I believe it remains relevant to today's
Yes.
world.
Oh, yes. Well, that's good. Yeah. But I mean, colonialism is definitely relevant in today's world, because one of the things that we can say about colonialism is that it transformed European colonialism, because there are other colonialism, of course, but European colonialism outside of Europe, in particular, transformed how many different territories and societies were going about their affairs, both because they drew maps, they made nations out of perhaps unreal sort of combinations of peoples and landscapes. They brought a new way of thinking about the world. They brought a Western education. They brought ways of thinking about health, etc. So this transformation is undoable. It cannot be undone. And its consequences are still with us, both in the endless disagreements that many post-colonial nations have within themselves because of, it might be for cultural or ethnic or resources reasons, but also in the way that communication, economies, and so on work. So it's with us in that respect. We haven't got over it. So we're still sorting out the legacy of that in many places. Some places more successfully than others. Some places have been blessed with, say, resources that would allow them to make headway. Some places have not. and continue in contention and poverty. A book can't fix that. A novel cannot fix that. But what a novel like Paradise, I hope, does is it says the story that you tell about that encounter is incomplete. And some of it is untrue. But essentially, it's incomplete because you're only telling the story from one point of view, or from a point of view that is maybe self-flattering, or perhaps just as ignorant that you didn't know what else was going on. You didn't know what was going on behind your acts of domination and your acts of taking over. So there is room for us, always. There is room, of course, to challenge and to give more information or a new understanding also. So that's what I see in addressing issues of colonialism. I see that one of the things that a writer like myself, or writers from post-colonial societies, or indeed not, you don't have to be from one place to write about such issues. But that is one of the things that that we can do. One of the things that needs to be done to say the story is incomplete. Now here's some more. Here's another way of looking that will perhaps inform and illuminate your understanding of that, and also to speak about the human cost, the human result, the human aspect of things that we think of as historical moments. I don't, by the way, only write about historical moments. I do write about as well contemporary moments too. But since we're discussing Paradise, okay.
We're looking forward to also reading more of your book. As a writer, as an author, have you received personal response from young readers as well?
Yeah. Well, these days, well, of course, because I know, and for a while, that this book is taught in schools, in colleges, in universities, and so on. So I know that there are young readers out there. And these days, we have email, and because our universities publish our emails on their websites and so on, it means anybody who feels like it can probably find me and send me a message.
Most interesting email that you have ever received from your reader, if you'd be kindly
No, I don't know.
share with us. You don't remember?
Well, yeah,
too
there are
many.
lots of them.
Yeah.
There are lots of them, but I was responding in particular to you saying to young people. So they probably used to do it more than they do now. Partly because there is a kind of, we don't want to disturb you. We don't want, which I'm very grateful for. We don't want to disturb you. So if anybody's listening there and thinking of sending me an email, thank you very much. Please do spare me, because I do get a lot of. So I just would be very happy if you were to like reading the book. I mean, there is really no need to tell me about it, but if you want to, okay. But so this is it. I do get to hear from a lot of people, including young people.
Oh, we have so many questions already on the chat. Thank you very much, everybody, for participating. Couple more questions, professors, before we go into our readers questions.
Okay.
We are how do you as you are also a professor of English literature and post-colonialism, and Paradise has been praised time and time again as something that brings a shift from European canonical type of narratives and storytelling. What would you want to bring to students of literature, as a professor of literature as well? What do you want to bring to students of literature in presenting your narrative, Professor?
So I'm not the only one. There has been a great movement of people writing on these issues for a long time as well. It's not even just a matter of, sometimes people say it's a kind of like a recent thing. It's not so. There have been writers from Africa, of course, writers from your part of the world as well,
Yeah.
who from South America, from other parts of the colonized or formerly colonized world, who've written about these experiences. Or indeed, there have been writers from the colonizing cultures themselves also who've written about these. So it's not to single out Paradise as something that does, in my part of the world, perhaps, about the experience of that part of the world. It could be that this is something that that is newish, new. What would I want my students? I should say, by the way, that I've retired from the university, so I'm not teaching anymore. But the issue still remains the same. What would you want to your students who might be studying issues of post-colonial literature, but even those who don't? Because one of the things that is very interesting about the curriculum now, at least in the UK, is that you don't have to be a specialist in this particular literature. You will find post-colonial texts quite probably in any or many other programs, so you don't have to be a student of post-colonial in order to be exposed to this material. Because people have embraced teachers, I mean, at different levels, schools as well as universities, have embraced this idea of there is something to understand, something that we need our young people to understand. And because this is interesting, because we don't just study literature for understanding or whatever. We study it because it gives us pleasure as well. So this is interesting material. And this attitude actually opens up the curriculum, or has opened up the curriculum in many places, in a way that is really quite encouraging and quite illuminating for the students, I think.
Well, we truly hope that Bahasa Indonesia translations of Paradise can also, extend and expand the discussions further alongside of many post-colonial Indonesian literature as well. So thank you for mentioning that, how it is, embedded into curriculums and help young people also to study colonialism and how they are relevant to the post-colonial experience, post-colonial lived experience that they are living today. And professors, many of our readers and audience, not only book communities or book clubs or readers, many of them are also aspiring writers. So before I go to our readers and audience who would like to ask questions to you, there are several already in the chat. Would you be kind enough to share with our aspiring writers or young writers who are joining us this afternoon about your creative process? What, uh, how is it will be truly a privilege and an honor for us to learn about the process of of a writer like yourself. It will be an honor for us.
I'm not sure what you mean by creative process, but let me try anyway. The idea, if you mean how is it that you arrive at an idea that then becomes a text, well, it's a slow business. Usually or often I have a thought, an idea, an impulse, like I mentioned earlier with Paradise, seeing my father walking across the square. And then you toss it around and think about it and maybe make a few notes, and the idea grows, different dimensions of it appear, and so on. Then I would start to worry about, okay, what kind of voice would I use in this narrative? What kind of narrative will I make? And that might require some experimentation. I might try it one way, I might try it another way. And then at some stage, which you recognize, or at least I recognize, because I've thought enough about it, and a spell of time appears, then you know you can concentrate on it. And then you start writing. And then it takes several years of writing and thinking and revising and thinking and so on. And all the time, new thoughts come in. So you have to go back and, rework this and rework that and rework that. Yeah. So with this kind of writing, where I'm not driven by a plot. I don't draw a map and say, this is how it's going to work. Although I do draw a map of a certain kind, like in my mind. It does require frequent returning and revising and rethinking and shaping and so on. But it's not a straightforward kind of rattle through from beginning to end. It's a matter of, drawing the text until it's ready. And even when you think it's ready, 3 months later, you think it's not anymore.
Yeah. Several years requires resiliency, and that's the theme that also appear in your book. How do you see resiliency, Professor? Because many of our, young readers, young writers, especially in resiliency, and especially in relation to your characters.
I admire that in that ability in human beings to generally to retrieve something from experience. Yep. Sometimes traumatic experience, but still to manage to retrieve something and to grow a little more generous, a little more human, a little kinder, or whatever it might be. So it's a quality I admire. It's a quality I do like to write about. But of course, amongst us, we also have a lot of nastiness and a lot of unpleasantness. So writing about reality, as it were, means acknowledging that both of these are part of the human phenomenon as well, the way we are. But there's also another kind of issue about resilience, which is that, particularly if you want to write, that there will be a lot of disappointments. It's not an easy profession, and so since we're talking about writers or people who want to become writers, then you just have to write and keep writing and keep going.
And keep going, yes. Keep writing and keep going. A message, Professor, before we go to our readers who would like to ask questions. A message for your Indonesian readers as a country in post-colonial context as well.
It's not a complicated thing, because if you're going to read the book, the message will be there. But I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you very much. Such a wonderful discussion. Thank you for your generosity in sharing your perspectives and insight as well. And I would like to deeply apologize. At the beginning, I was a bit distracted because there is a young reader behind me, my 5-year-old daughter. We are 3 years. We got over the pandemic, but still need to manage a couple of things with regard to remote working. So deepest apologies in advance, Professor. Truly do not mean to be disrespectful. And with that, thank you so much for your generosity. And with that, Mizaners, I'm sure that you have lots of questions. Professor, we have also journalists joining us. I would like to acknowledge and thank our friends from Kompas.com and Tempo and CNN Indonesia and Detik.com and SCTV and Kumparan, Jawa Post, IDN Times, TV1. So many, Professor. We are so honored and so privileged to have the opportunity to meet you. Tribun News, Pikiran Rakyat, Sindo News, Tirto ID, Viva Co ID, and other media friends. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us. And yes, quick answer, will there be a YouTube for this event? Yes, it is live stream on YouTube. And for those of you who would like to access in Bahasa Indonesia, please bear with us. In a couple of weeks, we are also going to have the recording of these conversations with Professor Guna with Bahasa Indonesia subtitle. So look out for that as well. We have first question, Professor, from Ibu Esti. The colonialism had happened a long time ago. Colonialism in terms of like, occupation. My children barely understand what it is. They only see it as dates and numbers in history books at school. Do you think that your book will help them to feel what is colonialism and how us as human are connected on deeper level through literature like your book, and how we should introduce this topic to Gen Z today?
I mean, that's a question that's inviting me to say yes. Yes, so I do say yes.
Yes.
And it's not surprising that children don't know about episodes in their own histories.
Mm-hmm.
This will be true of, I think, of most places and most societies, but it is the responsibility of both the education process that they go through. Perhaps it's also a responsibility of their parents to enlighten them about the world.
Yeah.
And part of that process is to say, here's an interesting thing you can read for yourself and arrive at a better understanding and knowledge. Yeah, of course, when they're able to read properly, I mean. But in any case, this is what we all go through. You start from a position of relative ignorance. Parents may tell you something which probably doesn't quite register. And then as you grow older and as you go through education and curiosity grows, and especially these days, life is so much easier with from that point of view with the internet. A question arises, you can just go to your internet thing when you're a little older, of course, not when you're 5, like your daughter, and say, what is that I heard? What is that about Tolstoy? And you can go and read about it. Mm-hmm. So it's not a process that requires an immediate sort of boom. Here you are, this is an encyclopedia about colonialism. It's a process of a gradual gathering of understanding and information and so on. So I would say, don't despair, to your question.
Don't despair.
Because seeds of that curiosity are already present from a very young age, and all that we need to do as adults and as parents and as educators is to just encourage that curiosity.
Mm-hmm. Wow, amazing. Encourage that curiosity. Yes, thank you so much, Professor. And second question we have from Rahmat from Detik.com. Professor Gurna, do you read Indonesian novels? Are you familiar with Indonesian novels?
I've read a few, very few. I have read, is it
Pramudia Anantatur, yes. Yeah.
I've read 2 of his novels. I've read, although I don't suppose Multatuli is Indonesian, but it's about Indonesia.
It's about Indonesia, yeah.
And maybe some others as well whose names I can't recall now. Mm-hmm. But partly it's because they're not translated into English, and I can only read in English.
Oh, yes, that's true. That's true.
Or at least I don't know if they are. Mm-hmm. Then not well-known translations. So it's not lack of interest, it's just simply not having the tools to be able to read
having
Indonesian.
the tools. Yes, there's been many efforts, especially the past 10 years, to translate Bahasa Indonesia or Indonesian literature in English. But of course, Pramudia's the Earth of Mankind and many
Footsteps.
other Pramudia's books are translated by Penguin Books, which is a
That's it. Yeah.
major, which is a major international publications. But we do have many others, like a collective efforts by publishers in Indonesia as well to translate Bahasa Indonesia or Indonesian literature into English. I think following up to the question from Pak Rahmat Detikkom about you read Indonesian novel. Now that we are very honored and privileged to learn that you have read Pramudia's Anantatur, some of the works of Pramudia's Anantatur, and also Multatuli. How do you see the connection, Professor? Again, in our post-colonial context.
What do you mean, connection between what
How
and
do you
what?
see the connections between, because Pramudia's Anantatur is also a post-colonial
Okay, all right.
literature. Yeah.
Mhm. Well, I was very, like I said earlier on, this is what literature does. So, but I learned a great deal about it, about Indonesia. Not that I didn't know anything, but that kind of intimacy that comes from reading a work of fiction, which really takes you into ordinary people's lives as well as extraordinary people. So there is that. I had at that point already read Multatuli. So here's another way of looking at the same landscape. I have over the years read a great deal of Conrad, which again, or other English writers, Somerset Maugham, etc., who've written about that region, if not about Indonesia in particular. So it was very interesting to have an Indonesian writer now talking about those periods. This is what I was also saying earlier about these accounts are incomplete. So Tour provides another dimension to this. So it was very, very informative, and of course was also very interesting and very pleasurable to read the big books and to read about that and that world.
Thank you so much, Professor. Already so many comments on the chat about how privileged we are, how happy we are that you're also familiar with a couple of Indonesian literature as well, and there's some recommendations also already in the chat box. Let's continue to the next question. A very important question by Icha. Professor, I'm very curious to know how the impact on the literary world, the impact of your book on the literary world and the readers, especially the people of Zanzibar, and especially after you won the Nobel Prize. And because that book raised the issue of the impact of colonialism, refugee experience, displacement, which is pretty much, unfortunately still part of today's world.
Yes, well, nothing very much has changed apparently, but in fact, things have changed. So we move on. We take small steps, but we move on. There's now, I think, a greater understanding of what is involved when we come to refugees or people who are in danger of their lives and taking the kinds of risks that we see people taking. I think there is a greater understanding, but the problems that create these catastrophes don't seem to go away. We seem incapable of preventing ourselves from inflicting cruelties on each other. I don't know the answer to the question of how is my work received and all that. That really is not, I don't think, a question that a writer can answer. That is something for another kind of scholar, as it were, who can examine that and discuss that and so on. So I'm just happy that the books are now available everywhere. Most of them, some of them were out of print, but now all of them are available, and they're available in many different languages, which means that a lot of people are reading them.
Mm-hmm.
That's enough for me.
Oh, you're so generous, Professor. We are also very, very happy that it is available in Bahasa Indonesia. And Professor,
So am I.
oh yes, we are so happy that it's available in Bahasa Indonesia because, you know, as a post-colonial country, also we are struggling with still, like you mentioned, the impact of colonialism still present in our education system, in the way we lived our life, in the way we organize our society, in many different parts. So we are very, very fortunate to have your book in Bahasa Indonesia. And Professor, our editor at Mizan, told us that you know thanks to your generosity, we are going to be able to hear the excerpt of your book. You'll be kind enough to read the excerpt of Paradise to us.
Yes,
So
well, I haven't quite taken this in. Is there a piece that you've already selected for me to read?
we are happy with any parts that you would like to share with us, Professor.
Okay, all right. So shall I do that now?
Yes, please, Professor. Whenever you're ready, we would like to
And
welcome
how?
Professor Abdul Razak Gurna with an excerpt from Paradise.
Okay, how long? Like 2 or 3 minutes, 5 minutes? What do you want me to do? Have you finished with the questions?
Yes, we are. Apologies for not making that clear. So, everyone, we're finished with the Q&A sessions, and our editor just messaged me 5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay.
5 minutes, Professor. Yes.
All right. So the section I'm going to read is going to be after they come back from the journey into the interior. Later, Yusuf could not remember the moment of their arrival. The days after their return were crowded with mobs of people circling the house and the clearing, clamoring to be heard. The porters and guards were there too, telling tales of their heroic survival and grumbling about their luck as they waited to be paid off. A village of tents and campfires arose in the large yard by the merchant's house, visited day and night by the curious and by street traders selling them food and coffee. Ramshackle kiosks appeared by the side of the road, and the aromas of grilled meat and frying fish drew knots of people to them. Flocks of scavenging crows abandoned their affairs to lurk on nearby trees, their sharp, bright eyes restlessly on the lookout for an unguarded morsel. Mounds of rubbish dotted the edges of the encampment, and thin rivulets of sluggish slime oozed out of them as the days passed. The merchant received a stream of visitors on the terrace in front of the shop. The old men who usually sat there graciously made space, but silently resisted eviction. They too wanted to stay close to the drama of the merchant's return. The manner of the merchant's visitors was solicitous, and they spent many idle hours with him, listening to his account of the journey with sudden exclamation or small cries of commiseration. While they chatted and drank coffee, the agitated crowds wheeled around them. At times, one or the other of the visitors took out a notebook and jotted something down, or strolled round to the stores by the side of the house. Muhammad Abdullah was installed in one of the stores, still recovering from exhaustion and fever, and suffering strange pains which had begun after the beating in Chatu's town. A length of cloth hung over the open doorway to his room, billowing languidly when there was any breeze. The visitors stopped to greet him and wish him well, before going on to glance into the other stores. They've come to pick the Sayyid's bones, Khalil said to Yusuf. There were bristles of grey in his hair, and his lean face was more pointed than Yusuf remembered it. He had greeted their return with frenzied delight and glee, overwhelming Yusuf with his joy, jumping around him, squeezing him, slapping him on the back. He's back, he told his customers. My little brother is back. Only look how he's grown. In the days which followed the early chaos, he drew Yusuf back into the shop with insistent demands that he come and do some real work for a change. Uncle Aziz smiled indulgently, and Yusuf understood that this was also the merchant's wish. He liked to have him within call and summoned him often to perform small courtesies to his guests, which he rewarded with casual tokens of his approval. Khalil talked at Yusuf incessantly, breaking off to deal with the customers whom he invited to admire the returned traveler. Look at those muscles. Who would have thought that feeble Kifaorongo would turn out like this? I don't know what they've fed him there behind the hills, but it swelled him up nicely for one of your daughters. At night, while the encampment hummed with murmurs and bursts of laughter or song, they spread their bedding on a corner of the terrace. Every night, Khalil said, "All right, now bring me news from the journey. I want to hear everything." Yusuf felt as if he was waking from a nightmare. He told Khalil that so often on the journey, he felt he was a soft-fleshed animal which had left his shell and was now caught in the open, a violent, grotesque beast, blindly smearing his passage across the rubble and the thorns. That was how he thought they all were, stumbling blindly through the middle of nowhere. The terror he had felt was not the same as fear, he said. It was as if he had no real existence, as if he was living in a dream over the edge of extinction. It made him wonder what it was that people wanted so much, that they could overcome that terror in search of trade. It was not all terror, not at all, he said, but it was the terror which gave everything shape. And he had seen sights which nothing in him could have predicted. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Beautiful excerpt. And I'm sure that our Indonesian readers are getting more and more excited to, yes, we have a chat. Everybody's so happy and just so honored to be
Very much.
able to listen to the excerpt of the book. And we thank you so much for your generosity, and to our operator as well, and also everyone, Mizaners, all readers, everyone can wait to read the book, have the Bahasa Indonesia translations on their hand, and in a few seconds we are going to have the countdown to the official launch of the Bahasa Indonesia translations of Paradise. Take it away. Gentlemen, Mizaners, you can scan the barcode for more details on how to purchase Paradise. We thank you for your kind participations and kindly look on the chat as well as there is an interesting promos, 20% discount if you purchase your copy of Paradise today. So bit.ly/SO Paradise. We're very much looking forward for all of you to read this amazing work by Professor Abdul Razak Gurna. With that, we're so excited and we can't wait to have the copy of your book in our hand and experience the journey with Yusuf. And as you mentioned, a story can open so many conversations, so many discussions, and for us to keep going and continue with our curiosity, especially in Indonesia, with our post-colonial context. So, ladies and gentlemen, Mizaners, all audience, all readers, with the official launch, I conclude this amazing afternoon, conversations with Professor Abdul Razak Gurna. We would like to wholeheartedly thank you for your generosity, for your time, for such an amazing insights and conversations that lead our audience to have a better context of your book. We're so honored to have you, Professor.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And we would
Okay.
like to also thank everyone who have joined us this wonderful afternoon, all the readers, communities, Mizaners, all the media. We encourage you to continue engage in the conversations. On behalf of Mizan Publishing and everyone at Mizan, the editorial team, I would like to thank you once again. Deepest gratitude, Professor Gurna, and everybody who have joined this session. Thank you so much. Have a blessed rest of the day. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.